Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Conscious Venture Podcast. I have the pleasure today to host Emeric Jung and Astadam Bamanga from Quadia. Quadia is an impact investment company based in Switzerland that has the vision of creating a circular and regenerative economy within the means of our planet. Thank you, Emeric and Astadam, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Maybe just as a quick introduction of the investment firm, maybe you can explain what Quadia focuses on and what's the typical kind of deal size for you, and your sectors of focus and geographies.
Yes, of course. So Quadia is a Swiss investment company dedicated to impact investing only, mainly providing debt and equity to private companies. We are supporting innovative entrepreneurs able to bring positive solutions into their value chain and to change their sector through new products or services. One important step was in 2017 from impact measurement, we moved to impact management in order to create and support regenerative economy. And regenerative economy, it's an economy which is more local, collaborative, circular, functional, and bio-inspired. So it's really to bring to impact investment a framework where we can create with entrepreneurs a better world. It's not anymore about reducing a negative impact in traditional businesses, but it's to create a new economic paradigm within the means of one planet.
And yes, and to build on that, to complement, maybe I'd say that our investment and strategy really focuses on investing in companies that are operating mainly in three sectors. So clean energy, sustainable food systems. So we look at the whole value chain, and the bucket we call circular products and materials. And that within that bucket, you'd find circular fashion, new textiles, alternative to plastics, for example. So those are the three areas we will focus on. So we're looking into these sectors because we believe they're growing sectors, really giving an answer to consumer-based demands and a market demand that is really growing and here to stay. And those will be the leaders of that transition towards a regenerative economy that will ultimately lead to growth, autonomy, resilience, and efficiency. Mm-hmm. So we invest. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. So it's my question is really, what's the typical kind of deal size, and do you see these sectors growing across the world?
Yes, indeed. So we do look, as I was saying, those are really sectors that are growing and are becoming the mainstream of tomorrow. So to be able to go into these deals or companies is really motivating. At the moment, we're going into deals that would be around from 2 to 10 millions. Mm-hmm. Deals that we would go into. We invest mainly in developed markets with a focus on Europe, and that's also part of our commitment of being active investors, so we can have that relationship once again. And so far, we've invested about 200 million euros and actively manage a diversified portfolio of about 40 companies through our impact fund, or customized mandates or club deals.
And maybe you can give a few examples of companies, that are really changing the world, that are in your portfolio and you feel really proud about them.
Regarding entrepreneurs, one thing which is important, it's about innovation. You don't need to think innovation just about technology. Innovation is just about how you are able to bring a new product or new services with positive impact. So about companies or positions, we are a lot looking at companies and entrepreneurs in the B2C channel, because we do things that consumers are able to make the change, to drive by buying or not buying a product, to drive what they want and to build the future they would like. So as companies, I would say, first, companies able to bring back quality in food. When so many times the answer is just about quantity to feed the world, you need companies that can focus on quality, avoiding some waste as well, reinventing the packaging. So one company which is local on the same time that will be global and worldwide, if for example Loop, they are totally reinventing the packaging and not recycling, it's about reusing. So that's something very strong. So Loop should be an example. Mm-hmm. Another French company, La Ruche Kidiwi, it's an alternative network for distribution directly from the farm to the fork. And very important, innovative solutions, social solutions. The farmer choose himself the price he wants to sell. So you give back the power to the farmer and not anymore just the retailer making the promotion or deciding the competitive price. Mm-hmm. Another example, Biogroup, which is producing at large scale kombucha. So you can really move some people from drinking drinks with too much sugar, but having with kombucha a drink which is also bringing you a better health and micronutrition.
Mm-hmm. And regarding food, because it's obviously a sector of interest for me. I was reading a lot, and this is also a discussion we've been having, in my investment firm. The real question we ask ourselves, and I think most of the people, is really: are we able kind of to feed the planet with better sources of food, with organic food, with more local food? I would love to hear your view on that.
Astajam, do you want to start? And I will have my strong conviction.
Please go ahead. I know your convictions over there.
Yes, of course you can, and you must. The key thing you must understand about food and feeding the world is to preserve biodiversity. It's not anymore having huge production, the same production, same kind of food on the same space, and you think about quantity. It's more important to think about calories you can grow on the same field, and the quality on the logistic are the answers to feed the world, and not the quantity. So it's a strong focus on for Quadia, sustainable food, and in fact it was what moved me from the trading room and investment banking and the screen I was working on directly to the green economy and to the field, is because I knew that local solutions, small companies, entrepreneurs, small farmers, they have all the capabilities to feed the world if you bring the right products, the right logistic, and you don't need just big multinationals which are actually quite fragile if the value chain is not any more sustainable.
I see. And maybe so that's a really good transition, to really understand where both of you come from, what your background is, and how did you end up in investment? Why did you decide actually to work in an investment company?
So I'd like to think of myself as a successful PPP, so public-private partnership. My father is a diplomat, while my mother is an entrepreneur. So my professional life kind of moved in that same vein, where I worked firstly for NGOs, child right advocacy, to international organizations, to then entrepreneurs networks such as Ashoka, Impact Hubs has a hub and node, all the way to Quadia today, an investment firm. And what the common thread would be is really that care for development, for connection, but also being able to tailor that to one-to-one interactions. So that's why I moved to, let's say, bigger institutions that were doing development, that were bringing that impact that was always in my life and in my background, to really coming and talking to an investor one-to-one, to an investee one-to-one, to really see how we can bring even more value by having that real connection and that presence with them at that time.
Mhm. So by value, you mean really impact, in the sense that you have a bigger impact when you invest, because as an investor, you probably have a bit more of an influence, and you can also redirect the capital towards, probably better pockets of economy, as I would call them.
Absolutely, and that was a great driver for me, because when I was working for NGOs, let's say, I was a lot focusing on fundraising. That was also something I was always doing. But at the end of the day, sometimes you feel like you end up cannibalizing the capital, because you have to defend your cause. Like, my children needing educations are more important than your children needing vaccinations. So that's sometimes quite demoralizing. Whereas when you are able to sit with investors and saying, okay, who will share, of course, the same convictions as you, saying, I have that capital, where can I best have an impact? What can it do? What is the ripple effect I can generate with that capital? And that's why we talk about even capital regenerated now at Quadia. It's not only about allocating that capital, but how can we make sure that it has that impact, that it's not only social, environmental, and at that point punctual, but how can it then create just virtuous cycles from there.
I see. Emeric, maybe about you, I think it would be interesting to hear the different, backgrounds, and it's interesting to put both of you in parallel.
So you just had an answer from the young generation. So Asta was able to start her career with her convictions. It was not really my situation. I had a very classical background, so students in economy and finance, late 90s. So I started in banking, and more specifically in investment banking and in trading room and capital market. I liked at this time the global approach you could have with capital markets, thinking about anticipating the world and thinking about solutions and what's going on. So I worked for more than 15 years on investment banking and as a financial engineering, structuring products, structuring new products, structuring solutions for investors through derivatives and after with hedge funds. But I would say since 2005, I became more and more skeptical about capital markets able to bring capital, finance, investment, the right allocation. And according to me, it was not anymore the answer you need for the real economy. Real economy needs something else, something new than investing through algorithm or through hedge funds. And it was really for me 2005 the beginning of looking at what you can do with your investment has solutions. So investing for building the futures and not just being a passive investor through instruments.
But what would be, I'm always in my interviews, I always like to understand kind of the fundamental driver, this thing you have inside of you, what is this thing inside of you that you want to materialize? What's your driver really in life, and I guess in work, because both are related.
I had already my career in banking. So now my main driver is just being helpful and doing useful actions. Today, I'm very lucky because my personal life, interests, hobbies are aligned with my work. I have a strong focus on local and sustainable food with environmental and social solutions to preserve life and biodiversity. So the convictions could be put at work, at investment. So that's the most important. And I would say, like one US president said one day, and you will guess immediately who I'm thinking about, ask not what you can receive from your investment, but what you can make possible with your investment. And it's really, I would say, my main driver now in my life and by being an investor.
Mm-hmm. And Esteban, what about you? What would be your main driver?
I think I'd go from my two two of my main core values and how they integrate them in my work. So those two values would be care and contribution, and I think I touched a bit of that. That's why I went into development. Therefore, the question is always, how can I be of service to others using, you know, the gifts that I have in order to empower them to make the best decision ever? I may be an optimist in thinking that, you know, humans are wired to do good, as long as you do provide them with the right tools and the right information. So those would be the main drivers of how I'm contributing to that bigger good that I would like to see.
No, that's very interesting. And I was also wondering, you know, I think it's for most of us, I think in the case of Astadam, it was pretty clear from the beginning. Emeric, you had specific kind of circumstances that pushed you also, you know, to make that move towards sustainability. For most,
it was always thinking about solutions. You know, in your work, how can you bring good solutions?
But my point is more, you know, I feel like around me and also for myself, it's, you know, sometimes we are so paralyzed by the complexity of the problem, and you also sometimes you are trapped in your comfort, in your day-to-day work, you know, and although you want to contribute, you want to do something, you don't really dare to take that step, and you don't really know where to start. So do you have any, you know, any advice or any tip on how can someone get realigned? Because as you say, I'm also persuaded that human beings are fundamentally good, you know, and they want to contribute and they want to have something, they want to be aligned with themselves and with kind of their mission in life, you can call it this way. But how can you really find it and have enough courage to pursue it?
So I'd say, how do you eat an elephant, right? It's one bite at a time. You have to take the first step of putting yourself out there. And to maybe backtrack a bit, my background is actually not that linear at all, but what helped it moving is putting myself out there, being vulnerable with the ideas I had, and then finding the right people along the way. So one way, it's really to understand that you're never alone in whatever you're doing. You may feel like the context around you is very traditional, very anything that could be done has been done, but put yourself out there so we can find you as investors or as partners, as initiatives that are walking towards that direction. You will find that support if you do dare to at least say, listen, this is the vision I have.
That's very interesting. So this was one of my questions really is, you know, we see that there are lots of people out there who have ideas, but who don't really dare. Do you think we can provide them with tools as a society, you know, to empower them, entrepreneurs and future entrepreneurs, in a certain way, you know, as a society or as investors? Do you, as Quadia, do you, you know, participate to some kind of, I don't know, do you have an incubator, or how do you make sure that we foster this talent and that we help these entrepreneurs to materialize their ideas?
I'll start, and Enrique will be able to complement. So as Quadia, we're quite involved in the ecosystems. As you may have heard from Enrique's experiences, he has a very strong background and network in the sustainable foods systems. So we are in fairs, we actually do go where the entrepreneurs are. So that's also a way for us to put ourselves out there so they can find us. So really do put our money where our mouth is by going to those places, going to these fairs. Whenever our investee is participating somewhere, we do ask them to let us know so we can either accompany them or provide that, you know, that in-person support so that we can, of course, enlarge our view. And then what we like to do is really work in ecosystems. So we have that bucket of sustainable food, but also we have different buckets where we have a network of experts and thought leaders that will support us in going or finding the entrepreneurs that may be struggling. And sometimes it's just a matter of not having the good timing. So if someone is, you know, too early, we'd still keep them, you know, as a contact just for the future references. And we are really big on creating synergies. So if we think of someone like, oh, it does make sense to connect you too, then that's something we're more than happy to do.
No, I think that's very important, is really putting people in contact, and because you create something that's bigger than, just the sum of the two people, and that's really, when you see the consequences and where it can lead to, it can be really marvelous. So no, that's great. Emeric, I think you wanted to comment.
Yeah. As a complementary comment, 10 years ago, it was already a strong commitment to explain that you will measure impact and you are doing some impact investing. But today it's not enough. We have large issues and we really to rethink our economy. So what we can share and give to our entrepreneurs first, it's a vision. It's not just because you are doing a good product, for example, with less plastic or less packaging, or you are producing the right food at the right place. It's not enough. If you really want to empower people and to make it happen, it's to put this framework we call and we share with other people as regenerative economy. Because by thinking regenerative economy, you give a roadmap to the entrepreneur. We have 4 objectives, so local, collaborative, circular economy, how you can put these entrepreneurs to move their business model to an ecosystem in their own value chain. Because by definition, by nature, if you think as an ecosystem, if you think as life it is, you will be sustainable and you can be successful because you are balanced. That's the most important you can have in a job and as a company. And to motivate people, it's yes, of course, to share the vision, to show them that on their value chain, other actors can do the same at the beginning or at the end of the value chain. And that's what Quadia is doing, thanks to the roadmap and thanks to growth capital to make their solutions being more and more shared and valued by people.
But one of the questions I always have in the back of my mind is really, how do you decide that, this company is good? Because nothing is really black or white, and some companies can be really good on certain dimensions, but not as good on others. I remember, we had a look at a company that they basically, it's a coffee chain, and it's very good because they provide employment to local people, and because they source locally as well. But at the same time, you have to they sell it in plastic cups. So you always have kind of this dichotomy. You have always several issues at stake within the company. How do you really decide that this company is good, it will contribute to a better world, and that certain dimensions are probably more important than others?
So as Enrique was saying, what was quite clear from our reflections from 2017 onwards was to say that we don't want to just measure what our investees are doing, but we needed to get out of that dichotomy of seeing things in black or white, as you were justly saying. We need for that, we do need tools that enable such a thing. So that's why our impact management tool really came about to be a holistic approach of looking at companies. So what we want to do is not come and impose a vision, but it's rather how do we co-create with that investee going into his company, seeing where he is, taking from where he is to where we could be. So that roadmap, that impact management tool is composed of 4 objectives. So it's about improving natural resource use, promoting fair value chains, supporting local communities, and fostering circular production and consumption. So we have those 4 axes, and then we'll see where the company is. And then from there, for example, say we have a company that's very strong in organic agriculture, but in transportation, they might not be that good. And then, there is a whole issue of the CO2 emissions they're having. So that's how we will look at the map, and we'll say, okay, you're very good at this, but then this is where we can come in and provide you either capacity building or connect you with some people, some thought leaders or experts in our communities and networks, or with other investees that could actually help you, for example, reuse your waste in ways that could generate more revenue or actually bring more value to the company. So it's not so much about us coming with priorities to impose, but it's rather seeing where the company is and how we can create that holistic system using our impact management tool.
That's very interesting, and indeed, I think the best way is really kind of to formalize it and to have a formal approach and more holistic approach of dealing with all of these issues. I was also, kind of wondering, how do you, because you mentioned previously that impact is obviously something important. This is what you work for. You work for a real impact. How do you assess this impact across the portfolios? Do you have kind of one single metric that you follow for each one of them, or is it all different KPIs per company? How do you make sure that you generate real impact?
We have for all companies the same methodology. It's so our own methodology, which is how you drive a company to regenerative economy, how you drive a value chain or economy from linear economy, which is consuming 3 or 4 planets a year, to the limit of 1 planet. So that's this holistic approach. So how do we do this? It's 4 main objectives with around 15 KPIs, where when we start our investments to the exit, we will have and decide with the entrepreneurs a roadmap how they can improve and have more engagement on all these KPIs through time. So it's really a roadmap and an impact score that will grow with more and more results. So it's not anymore, as you can see today in big companies, they think about how they can reduce what is negative in their business model or in their production. Which is really important in our way of thinking. It's don't be happy if you just change things. Think the big change from now, and think how to change all the value chain. And it's beyond impact. It's really a new paradigm, a new economy, which is a positive economy and not a negative economy. So of course we adapt our methodology to the company, but as we explained, and I hope it's clear from the beginning, it's not just through a score on being happy if the company has less plastic or has a more local value chain. It's a holistic approach really to change the system. And when you start with, I would say, small-sized companies, growing these companies which are doing already good, by having these companies growing, you make them more visible on their value chain, and then you can really succeed in the convergence of these small companies that can become bigger, and big companies that can see on the value chain better actors or companies doing better than themselves. And once they work together, you have a success in not just a transition. When you have this convergence, it's a success because it will be an ecological and social transformation of our economy.
I see. No, it's very interesting because it's kind of the first time I hear about, as you say, this global approach and really rethinking the whole economy and the whole paradigm, because usually people would always say in impact, we just want to improve, or we follow these KPIs, and if we reach these KPIs, then the team receives a bonus. But it's a very different approach from what you suggest.
And to be very clear, it's not one system against another one. We are not telling you that we are only supporting small companies and we are against multinationals. Mm-hmm. Our part of the job is multinationals, they don't need Quadia or investment. But small companies, they need our capabilities to support them and to make them bigger. And we know that some big companies will change, and they have to change because consumers, because politics, because rules are changing. Some of them are not changing and they will collapse. Others are able to change. So what we are working on now, it's with our portfolio, it's to bring to success complementary companies, complementary solutions. And once they all work together on their value chain, you will succeed.
And what kind of entrepreneur does it take to, to kind of rethink the whole model together with you, obviously, but to be able to drive this change? What are you looking for in an entrepreneur like that?
I'd say, even though, of course, we're all different and each individual will have their own strength, we do see some common characteristics from one entrepreneur to another that also ensures us, as an investor, that we can make the step and follow them. So we'd say, first of all, a great impact entrepreneur would be a great listener and observer of what's going on around them, to be able to listen to what is the core issue that they want to address and how to best bring a solution about. It's also, of course, a vision enabler, because it's often those people that are coming with new models, new way of doing things, that are able to bring them forth. And as I was saying before, make themselves visible enough so that we can come in and then support them. And there are, of course, change drivers. As Enrique was saying, this convergence can only come about if those big players are coming into the field that the entrepreneur has created with their solutions. So that would be the three main characteristics that I would say for an impact entrepreneur.
And do you see like a typical profile? Are these more young people, who are driven, who want to see a change in the world, or is it really you see it across the society? I think it's very interesting to understand kind of these dynamics where these people come from, and whether they have some circumstances in their lives that actually change them and make them realize that they want to pursue a passion or a mission. What's the typical profile?
I think it's everywhere and everybody. It's just when you look at things and you are not happy anymore with how things happen. Does it come after a personal crisis or not? I don't think so. I do think you don't need to have to be sick or to have a personal crisis to decide to change or to make things differently. Sometimes it could be dangerous. If it's someone changing from an extreme to another extreme, perhaps it's someone fragile or not with enough conviction. What we really like, it's people with already expertise, a knowledge on something, and they can just see that they can move their expertise to something better because it's going nowhere, or it's always the same. We are today in a quite quantitative economy with just a short-term view, and it's when you are not anymore happy about what's going on, or you think what's going on is dangerous and you want to reconcile the short term with the long term. It's also, if you know, this worldwide movement, which is slow food and everything which is around the slow concept. It's instead of driving like crazy and to hit the wall, you just stop, you just slow down, and you think what is not right anymore, and you try to bring your expertise around the solutions. And about people, how do you change? It's sometimes at different age when you are able not to think anymore, or not to focus anymore too much on what people think about you, but you just do things for yourself. It's not about selfish, but do things for yourself make you sometimes to be a better listener and to excel because you are doing what you like, or you excel because you thought something cannot be like this anymore, and you will fight to build something else. That's this kind of people we always meet. And perhaps Astajam, the example of Renault workshop, because that's the Fashion Revolution Week, and it's exactly the discussion you had yesterday. It's just an example of an entrepreneur with an expertise that builds something into the classical value chain. If you want to give the example of Renault workshop.
Oh, excuse me. I thought we were not giving that example. Yes, indeed. So the renewal workshop is one. Actually, we were talking about the companies earlier that we wanted to highlight. That's one of my favorite examples to give, because as a consumer of clothes, I was maybe not as aware as I should have been of the impact of that industry. And indeed, it is Fashion Revolution Week. So yesterday we did have a talk with the person from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation explaining how not only heavy the challenges were, but also how the solutions are coming about. And the renewal workshop is all about how do we make the most of actually a problem, which is the waste in the fashion industry. So they take either the takebacks, the returns, or the cloth having some sort of minor defaults from big brands that we know, such as the North Face, H&M, and then they would recondition, refurbish those clothes and either sell them on their own channels or the secondary channels of the brands that they've been working with. So that's another example of also seeing how someone just saw a waste and addressed that just in a way that actually makes also sense to think about. When we talk about impact, one thing that I would like maybe to stress is, coming from an African background, we do have that wisdom of just saying actually what works is common sense. So what we see is actually what makes sense inherently is actually impactful. So Emric talked about Loop earlier, which is that company that provides alternative packaging against single-use plastics. It's that old milkman model that we used to have. We used to buy milk from the milkman in a glass bottle, and then we'd give it back to him once we were done. The renewal workshop is the same. We used to know how to sew our own garments once they were undone. So how do we bring back this kind of sense into our senseless economies? That's also one point that's quite interesting to see.
No, that's very interesting. You know, I fully agree. There's so many opportunities out there. And if people are aware and conscious, and as we say, you know, good observers of what's going on outside, they can really find opportunities. One of the questions I think our listeners have, and everyone in the traditional field, is really, can we make money with investments, you know, with impact investment, or with investment in smaller companies that are trying to change the world? It's I guess it's a very common and traditional question for you, but would like to hear your view on that.
No, I think that's a great question, because there still has to be some myth busting in that area, in saying that impact investing is not philanthropy, is not investing and expecting low returns. Actually, what we've seen is that not only does impact investing generate equal market returns, but actually if you do change your perspective on how you view returns, you'd see that impact investing actually brings back even more, because you're taking into account social and environmental impacts into account. And that goes back to that ripple effect. A ripple effect that I was mentioning before, of how actually the capital is not only coming back with an interest, but actually generating something that even with our tools, we may not be able to truly capture. So we move away from just the risk return view to a risk return impact trifecta.
Yeah, no, this is exactly, you know, I was listening to this impact investor on one of the podcasts, and he was saying exactly that. He was saying, you know, we need to rethink this whole view. Basically, the objective, we need to define why do we need the capital and what do we want to do with this capital, in the sense that just to multiply the capital is probably not a goal in itself, right? The capital needs to do something else than just multiply itself without any purpose. And so he was really arguing, you know, about the fact that we should integrate all of these components, and we should make every investor responsible, because basically with the capital, every investor impacts the rest of the world and the rest of the population. It can be, you know, a weapon of destruction, obviously, capital, as it can be something great, you know, to foster changes in the society. So I totally agree with your view. Maybe a question on, you know, you also mentioned, you mentioned fashion, you mentioned that you invest a lot in food. What are kind of the most urgent areas today to address, be it social or environmental, from your point of view?
The most urgent environmental and social issues are actually our capability to make choices to reconcile short-term and long-term. that everything is about this, because according to your past or your interests, you can focus on different topics. There are so many, but most important is being able to reconcile this short term we are living now and we are changing with long-term interest and future generation. So it's everybody can do this. I really like how consumers act. I said it already. That's the same for investors, for entrepreneurs, for everybody. Don't think that solutions will come from governments or big companies. It really comes from how you act in your daily life. And one investment or buying something is more powerful than one vote. So more specifically, what we really need is we have to rebuild our system and our economy from a linear economy based on oil or taking too much natural resources and wasting these natural resources to a regenerative economy. I mean, an economy able to grow, to grow the right things, the right people, to share in the one planet limit. That's what we really need to do. So after, you can think about, of course, climate, biodiversity, farming, pollutions. It's very important. But the same, the target or the positioning must be, don't take from the planet and people more than what you can give back. Yes. So that's the regenerative economy, and we are very strong in our convictions, and we are more and more people to share this conviction now. And you can hear even from the from the European Commission, this statement for regenerative economy.
I see. Astedjan, do you have another opinion?
No, I think in that we do align.
Yeah. No, very interesting. Thanks a lot. Maybe, you know, your message to entrepreneurs or future entrepreneurs or young people who would like to address these issues and who would like to do something, what would you tell them?
I'd say as investors, what we can offer is really a platform to listen to what you have to offer. That's why it's so important to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid of the size of the issue at hand. You don't have to solve all social and all environmental issues at hand. Just start where you are, talk to those around you, connect to networks, and the ones that will be meant to be on your path will find you. So the main thing as a message for me is get yourself out there and we will meet each other.
I will add something that today we didn't discuss about this, but we are living a big crisis with the COVID crisis. So we are at crossroad today, and even more with this virus to look at what people can do and cannot do anymore. So if you can stop the economy for a virus, it should open new ways of action for climate change and economic development. So we must be very careful about what will be the next step after this crisis, not to let governments and decide what you have to do or what you can do, but really to tackle it and to take it by yourself. It will be with your personal data control, or what people can accept if they feel insecure. It will be very dangerous. So all the people who can really understand what's going on now with this crisis, and not taking it on a passive way, but taking it like possibility really to rebuild something better after. We don't have to wait a big change. We just need to be more people taking the risk or having the appetite to change things. So I don't think that after this crisis, everything will change. We will just be more people with the goodwill to change. And in this case, I will use one quote from Mr. Shaw, George Bernard Shaw. He explains that there are those people that look at things as the way they are and ask why, I dream of things that never were, and I ask why not.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a great message and a great conclusion to this podcast.
So as entrepreneurs, as investors, make what you want and what you like happen, and build the future with your investment and yourself. Be a change maker, of course.
But I think it's important what you mentioned at one point during our discussion. You said, this is where you get enough maturity to do what kind of you want, instead of looking at others and being influenced by others. And that requires probably, yes, a lot of maturity. You have to know yourself. You have to know what your values are, what's your, what the driver in your life is. And that requires quite a bit of introspection. But I feel that, more and more people are getting there because obviously they realize that the way we live, and as you say, in the current crisis, I think more and more people realize that something needs to change, because obviously we are abusing the earth and we are using way too many resources. So hopefully this will be a positive trigger, for a new future. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for taking the time, to explaining us what you do and how you want to how you're contributing to changing the world. I found it extremely interesting. I hope our listeners too. I will put all the links, of Quadia Capital, and also Imric. I know that you write quite a bit, and you have also given, I think, a few speeches, TED Talks, etc. So I will put all the links below. And if there are any interesting projects out there, please contact Quadia. I think there would be great partners to help you in this path.
And by looking at the companies, these companies are successful when you are living crisis. You can really see when some people are more resilient. It's also for people, but also for companies. And your question about being profitable. Of course, when you are more resilient, you can be also profitable in crisis, and the next 40 years will be a kind of crisis. So we are very confident in our portfolio.
Yeah, that was a very positive conclusion. The next 40 years will be permanent crisis. But yeah, I think it's...
Crisis is not always negative. Crisis is about...
it's
you
an
understand
evolution.
that things must change.
Yes, we need to adapt for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. So if your listeners are out there and some entrepreneurs are among them, we're waiting for the messages.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.